Hi, I'm Elizabeth with L&E Research, and I'm here to share more about online qualitative platforms that offer respondents in-the-moment access through mobile and social media. Let's learn more about this online qual platform from our technology partner, AHA. Hi, I'm Elizabeth with L&E, and today we'll be talking with one of our technology partners from AHA. Our guest speaker for today is Ray Fisher, CEO of AHA. Ray, let's jump right into the presentation.
Okay, thanks Elizabeth, appreciate it. All right everybody, just a quick background on me so you kind of know who I am and what I'm about. I'm a native Detroiter and I've got AHA headquartered back here in Michigan outside of Detroit. I started my career as a brand manager at Pepsi back in the 90s and then got into technology around 98 to 02 and then became a focus group moderator kind of by chance. In the late 90s I did a little dabbling there and then was full-time from 2002 to about 2012 when the technology stuff we've been working on, which became AHA, started percolating. I did my first online study back in 2005. It was kind of a fun little exercise using some different kind of software that basically did a nice job of collecting open-ended data. But you know, obviously things have evolved quite a bit to where we are today. We launched AHA. We started our first platform in 2007 and launched AHA in 2012 with a lot more features, newer code, etc. And we've been growing like hotcakes since. So, with that said, why we're here today, or who we are, I guess I'll start with that just to give you a sense of what AHA is all about. We are an asynchronous strategic qual platform, and what that essentially means is that we put studies together and respondents are able to come in and do activities at their own pace but on a schedule. So for instance, if we did a 4-day study, they'd have an activity, usually 1, maybe 2 per day, that would have to be completed sometime between like 6 a.m. and midnight. Okay, so there is a schedule, but it does allow people to come in and do things kind of what I'll call at their convenience when they're focused and ready to actually dive into doing some qual research. So we do strategic B2C and B2B studies. We probably do 75% consumer and 25% business to business. We work basically around the world, all time zones, all languages, you know, pretty much 24/7, 365. The services we provide, we've got the platform, we'll program for you. We have a few DIY clients. We will project manage, which is important in making sure your study runs well. We will do the recruiting as well, and what we do is we partner with companies like L&E to recruit. So depending on what the study is, what we'll do is select the right recruiter, and oftentimes it may be L&E, and we'll do the consulting as well if you need that. So if you need analysis, moderating, reporting, etc., we've got people on the bench that can handle that for you. Okay. Our activities range from qualitative stuff, of course, that's what we are. We've got some quant tools that certainly help enhance some of the qual stuff that we do. We've got projective activities like collage and storytelling. I'll touch on those a little bit today. You know, we've got social activities as well, where you can create community and have people converse and share and think and ideate together. So why we're here today, what I want to do is talk to you today about how we leverage technologies to design and connect better with respondents in online studies. So, you know, the technology is pervasive today. The biggest thing that's happened to us from a qualitative standpoint was the Apple invention of the smartphone. Thank you, Steve Jobs. That has given everybody the ability to, not only, of course, computers are a big part of it, but at the same time, a lot of things are mobile these days. So in the moment type things like pictures, video, brief open ends, closed ends, etc., those things are all in the pockets of virtually everybody around the world at this point in time. So that's been a huge evolution over the last decade. The other thing I want to do is talk about how we maximize respondent engagement so that you do connect deeper with your respondents and you get better insights. I want to also share with you how we do things, our best practice stuff that'll help you evolve your online research knowledge and skills. So, and again, if you haven't done online qual before, maybe this will increase your interest in doing so. And if you have done online, maybe this at least just confirms or affirms the best practice approaches you take or gives you a few new ideas on how to run studies better, how to do better studies, get deeper, richer insights. So what we're going to go over, as I mentioned, best practices. I'll show you some methods, tools, tactics, etc. I want to show you a little bit of a mix. So I'm going to do a little bit of a an example, kind of tour of a 4-day study and kind of the things you can do over that period of time to really, yield a lot of data, a lot of rich insights, and, get really deep inside the minds of your consumers or respondents. And then I want to also just kind of cover, I'll touch on these through the process here, kind of our next generation of tools to help you go beyond open-ended Q&A. So I don't want this to be all about AHA, really about online qual, but again, obviously we have a platform, so I'm going to use that as kind of the example setter, okay? So with that said, what I want you to walk away with today is the knowledge of the possibilities, our best practice approaches, which, I'm sure a lot of you share, some enhanced online qual selling skills. So if you got the opportunity to sell any online qual in, hopefully you get a few tips today as to what some of the strengths are and some of the approaches so you have a little bit more confidence in that area. And then finally, as I mentioned, confidence, more confidence in the methodology of doing qual online. Again, I think the penetration right now is probably somewhere around 60%, those out there who have done it before, but that still leaves 40% of the, potential user base of consultants who have not done, and clients who have not done online qualitative research. So there's a vast opportunity still out there for all of us. So I'll start with the human touch from a best practice standpoint. One of the most important things that happens in online studies is the moderator establishing who they are and what they're all about. Obviously, technology is not necessarily human, so what we want to do is try to humanize it as much as we can, and that can be done through video. We really strongly encourage moderators to do a little bit of an intro video for their studies. And I've got a little example up there. I'm not going to play it, but the moderator in this case, introduces herself, humanizes herself, says, hey, here's who I am, this is what I'm about, might share a few tips and thoughts about, what they're all about from a personal standpoint, but also to talk about the job that they're doing and the responsibilities of the respondent themselves, a little bit of study direction, here's what we expect of you, etc., which goes a long way to making things work. So respondent intro, often that's turned into into the moderator intro is also usually segues into a respondent intro. So they'll do their intro in video, and oftentimes a respondent will then flip their webcam on and give a little intro about themselves, what they're all about, etc. So that's a little video piece there. The next thing that's really, really important in getting a study rolling is on the first day, you want to do some personal notes. So most platforms, I'm sure all, have the ability to probe. So in the first day, on that first activity, if someone uploads a picture of their family or talks a little bit about who they are, it's a great opportunity for the moderator to jump in and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your involvement in the study, and, great looking picture of your family. Something personal that kind of, again, makes them feel welcomed, appreciated, and also lets them know that that moderator is reading the information that's being provided on the site. So another key thing that goes a real long way to making sure studies run well is also daily notes. So every morning it's a good idea for a project manager or the actual moderator to send a note that just says, hey, here's what we're doing today. Maybe give people a little bit of a kick in the seat of the pants if a few people have fallen behind, a gentle nudge, by saying something like, hey, a few of you have fallen behind, do your best to catch up. If you got any issues, please let us know and we'll try to help you out, okay? So the human touch is super important. This next page, I'm going to tee up basically the basics of a study, running a great study. So the 101 of this, or kind of the basic best practice approach, I want to cover setting clear objectives. So you definitely need to make sure people know exactly what they're supposed to do. I'm going to talk to you about how the recruiting plays a big role in the success of your study. I want to spend a little bit of time on the creativity of how you mix and match things to make the studies interesting to the respondents. And while interesting is great and fun is great, it also needs to be done with the context of, hey, what kind of data are we trying to get and how are we going to get it, okay? And then finally, when you think about all the data, the unstructured data that can be produced by an online qual study, we also want you to think about, and we'll give you a few tips on that, about designing your study with the report in mind, okay? So with that said, let's dive into the objective setting. So on the objectives, you want to have super clear objectives. You want to establish these with your clients. And you want to be real careful. A lot of times these studies end up being a little bit of a committee approach. You've got teams of clients, and they may send your guide around, and then you get everybody's 2 cents on it, which is fine. But you got to be careful to stick to the mission, not make it a free-for-all. Okay. You can have a guide more from a 30-minute situation per activity to an hour's worth of activity by letting the committee kind of run ragged with it. So you want to manage against that. Always be respectful of the fact that, hey, there are different ways to get at things. You definitely need to, again, stick to your objectives, be very clear at what you're trying to do, and not be redundant in the kinds of questions that you ask. Okay? So your activities, you should look at ones that are both pragmatic. There are clearly going to be open ends that you need answered, and you want to get at the projective stuff too that kind of gives people the opportunity to use their imagination, share emotions and feelings through activities such as collage and storytelling that get at the answers and the core insights you're looking for, and even unexpected insights that you may not have anticipated, by giving them this freedom to kind of share their thinking, their thoughts, emotions, actions, etc., around whatever the challenges you put in front of them. Okay? So it's a mix of, definitely required questions, like open ends, and then also, again, mixing in some fun stuff that gives you deeper, richer insights. All right? On the recruiting side, you want to pick your recruiter carefully. And again, oftentimes we work with L&E. They're a very high-quality shop in terms of recruiting people to studies. They're vested in it. When respondents are there, they know what they're doing, and if they're not, keeping up or keeping pace, L&E and your recruiter should be involved in trying to keep people on pace. Okay, most platforms have tools to know exactly where people stand at each point in time, and you want a recruiter that's going to be, again, involved, not just handing people off to you and hoping it goes well. Okay, active engagement through the process is super important. You want to make it very clear in your screener what's expected of respondents. People need to know, hey, this is a time commitment of at least 30 minutes a day. You're going to be doing video, uploading pictures, maybe a store trip, etc. You want to make sure there's no surprises, so when they start the study, they look at it and go, oh, I didn't expect to do this, I'm out. So you will help fight against attrition if you're very clear as to what's going to happen over the course of the study. Okay? Next point here, very important. Incent them accordingly. You do not want to be cheap with them. This is not a quant sample. These are qualitative people that typically might be recruited to, let's say, focus groups. So you've got to pay them for their time. A good rule of thumb is $1 per minute. So, for instance, if you've got a 3-day study, you're expecting 90 minutes of activity, you should pay them about $100. Okay? So it's a nice round number. Go to 4 days at 30 minutes a day, and you're paying them $125. Throw in a store trip, and again, you might be throwing in another $25 to $50. So it might be up to $150 or $175. And again, sounds expensive, but again, you get what you pay for. Okay. Another key thing here: stick to your schedule. If you've got a 4-day study, there are times when there needs to be gaps in between days to maybe rework some concepts, etc. But be very clear as to what's happening each step of the way. Here's the calendar. Launch when you say you're going to launch activities when you say you're going to launch them. If for any reason, and it does happen from time to time, that there are changes in plans, people start noodling the guide a little bit or deciding they want to ask something a little bit differently down the road on day 2, 3, or 4, it's okay if you have to pause, but you have to let respondents know, hey, we're taking a quick break, we got to retool some stuff, we'll pick it back up tomorrow. So be very clear as to what's happening each step of the way. If there are any changes to the schedule, be very clear, direct, and honest about what's going to happen next. Okay? And again, back to my point about recruiters, keep them involved. If a recruiter does not want to stay involved in an online study, you want to pick somebody else. It's critical. They are their people. They have brought them, and you've paid dearly to have these, quality respondents in your study. So you want the recruiter to stay involved, and it's not a real heavy-duty job. It's just a matter of making sure everybody's on pace, or most of the people. I think a good expectation on participation is 90% plus. So 90% of the people recruited to the study should do everything in a high-quality fashion. 80 is probably okay, but again, we shoot for 90 plus and oftentimes get 100. So from a creativity standpoint, you want to make studies interesting to respondents. You don't want to do the same things every day. If you give them a battery of open-ended questions, it's going to feel basically like a qualitative survey. which is not what this should be, okay? You have the opportunity with all the tools and technologies out there today to do a lot of different things, picture taking, video, using webcams, doing collages, doing storytelling, social activities, etc. So you want to mix it up. So, and I'll show you an example of that before we close out, but you want to do something a little bit different each day. One of the things that really makes things interesting is, let's say in day 2 or 3, you might launch some projective techniques. And again, these things may require them searching for symbolic images that represent emotions on the web, adding them to a collage, etc. Those are fun things for people to do, but make sure you've allocated enough time, enough incentive, etc., and you're not overworking them, okay? So you do want to mix things up. We think, and this is our opinion, that the best studies are oftentimes more one-on-one than social. So again, if you had 3 or 4 or 5 activities, let's say, one of those to 2 of those should be, a community-based thing where people can react and talk and like and share on each other's stuff. But at the same time, a lot of it is one-on-one too, okay? So it's a little bit of a balance. And one thing to think about social is if you have it all social every day, think about it this way. If you have 40 respondents in a study and they're doing 4 activities, you're going to require somebody to do their own activities where they have to contribute, and then also look at 39 other people's entries on whatever the activities might be. That's a huge amount of work. Huge amount of work alone for the moderator, but to ask respondents to go in and do their thing for a half an hour and then look at 39 other people's stuff is really a bit of a burden. So you want to kind of be selective and strategic as to how you use social, okay? So the net of that is don't overload them. You want to be true to your 30-minute kind of time allocation, and a nice way to do that is to actually go through your study and do it yourself, or have a friend do it, or a colleague, and see how long it takes them to actually, actively, passionately participate. That should give you a good guide. Okay. Now you want to design with the report in mind, and what we mean by that is, these online studies can produce a lot of unstructured data. It's tough to say. You want people to emote, share, and be verbose and give you depth around the answers and responses they give you. And sometimes people will run off a little bit long on that. So you just don't know exactly how much data you're going to get, but usually it'll be a lot. So you want to be careful not to ask too many questions. Definitely avoid redundancy in my last point there. It'll drive you crazy when you do a report to think, oh, I asked that 3 different ways. But even more so is you're going to hear from respondents. They're not fools, and they will see the same question worded a few different ways and say, I think I just answered that 4 times. So you want to be careful not to have any redundancy. And then also from a reporting standpoint, you want to think about what will tell the best story on the back end. When you've got things like pictures, you've got video, you've got, with video you can make little movies. You've got storytelling activities. You've got great quotes, collages. You've got just a potential for, perceptual map composites, etc., that will give you a lot of great eye candy that has legitimate, strategic insights associated with it that will make your report look amazing, okay? So you can definitely think about, what do I need? What am I trying to get at? And how can I use those things to tell the story back to my client when I write my report? So again, getting all this great stimulus to use to support your findings. Again, think about that in advance. You don't want to overload it with that stuff, but again, if you've got great images and pictures and collages, etc., it really brings a report to life. Okay. So just some basics on design. Here's what I see as the most common approaches, and oftentimes we'll have year-long studies where people come in once a week, maybe once a day, do a diary kind of entry, maybe in a unique activity once a month, whatever it happens to be, but they can be as long as a year. But the common ones are this: homework. So prior to focus groups, a lot of times there'll be, something like a collage, a storytelling, maybe a store trip, or a social activity prior to doing focus groups. The incentive on those tend to be $25 to $50, probably $50 if you're sending them to the store. But to do a collage or some other kind of, activity that might take them, again, 20 to 30 minutes before the group, you might incent them $25 to $50, okay? The real common approach that we see most is the 4-day study. And that's kind of a deep dive, consumer deep dive. Respondent-wise, 32 to 48 respondents seems pretty typical. Requiring them to have, 30 minutes for sure. It's nice when they go a little bit longer if they're passionate about what they're doing. And again, you can use all the activities that are in anybody's toolbox over 4 days. And again, maybe a store trip thrown in. And you can also do a little concept testing and idea testing if you want to. Okay. Incentives for that one, as I mentioned earlier, 4-day studies might be $125 to $150 if you do a store trip. Now, one thing to think about too, on incentives, with any of the business-to-business stuff, your incentives are going to go up considerably. Okay. So what might be $125 on a consumer basis for a 4-day study, you'd probably be looking at maybe $250, $300 for a business-to-business person. And again, depending on their level in the organization, it could maybe go as high as $500 for C-level type people. Okay. So 7-day studies also come up a lot. Usually the 7-dayers have a diary component to them. So it could be a home use test. It could be, a bunch of things that might be trying to record like moments in time, like treating your dog or something like that. And those tend to be about $200 for the week. And again, you can do any of the activities you'd like to do. 7-dayers usually have 4 solid activities, and again, with maybe a diary component, store trip layered in. Okay? So those are kind of the 3 most prominent ones, but again, studies can be customized to any number of respondents or any length of time you want from a longitudinal standpoint. So you want to mix it up. Should not be a survey. I'm going to show you 4 days of approaches. You've got a getting to know you activity. We've got a journey or a buyer decision journey map kind of approach. We've got some ability to do some competitive analysis with brand mapping. I'm going to share that with you. And then, also you can, if you want a pure concept test, obviously you may concept test over 3 or 4 days and specifically do just that and show respondents a couple of ideas per day. But if you're doing a consumer deep dive and there are some kind of early stage, positioning statements or ad sets or ideas that want to be, that you want to get some feedback on, you can certainly serve those up as well in the context of a 4-day study. Okay? So the way that can look is this. So when a respondent comes in, they're going to see basically, I'm sure all platforms are fairly similar. They're going to see some kind of calendar of events. Things are going to happen. Activities are going to have to do. The times that they launch, the times that they're due, and then they'll give you status too. Usually they'll say it's completed or opening up the next day, etc. So this is what they generally will see: the tasks, the expectations, the launch times, and the due dates throughout the study. So typically in a 4-day study, and again, the design possibilities are infinite, of course, but getting to know you is a very popular starting point. And it's really nice as a kind of softball warm-up. Again, moderator intro, throw it over to the respondent. Maybe they give you a little webcam intro. Maybe they give you a tour of their fridge, whatever it happens to be. But you want to start soft. Hey, who are you? And really sound interested in who they are as people. Maybe what they do for work, life passions, family, pets, their neighborhood, their world, friends, hobbies, etc. Okay? So those are things you want to kind of have a little softball, and that could be 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning, which, again, is definitely not a throwaway. It's a great way to get context and kind of create personifications around different segments. So it is definitely a worthwhile part of it. And while it may not sound like you're getting at your core issues, it's really important to the respondent to feel like they're getting to know you and you're getting to know them. That's a positive thing. And then also just a context setter as to what their life's all about, and then start to ease into the category. So that first half could be warm up on who they are, what they're all about. Then let's segue into category stuff. And then, again, let's say you're doing a food study or laundry detergent. Have them take you to the fridge. If it's beverage, hey, show us your beverages in the fridge and what are the philosophies around that. Why do you buy these particular products? Where do you buy them? And they'll narrate that for you. So a 1, 2, 3-minute video is fantastic. They could do it on their smartphone. On our platform, they could beam it directly to the platform itself without having to come back and plug in. It just all works great from their smartphone. Activity sent to the phone. They do it. They send it up to the platform. So getting a tour, again, laundry room, pantry, whatever it happens to be, narrated, what's the product lineup, could be medicine cabinet. Again, Whatever your category is, you can do something with it. Garage, basement, you know what to do. Okay? Pet study, hey, show us all your pet treats or toys, etc. So getting to know you is usually a great start on day one. All right? Day two, here's an example of what can be done here. In this case, we could be looking at some journey stuff and a couple of things. So I've got collage up here, and there are a couple things to think about with collage. If you're asking people to go out and get symbolic images that represent how they feel about whatever task you put in front of them, maybe they're buying a new car, buying a new house, giving treats to their pet, giving their kids snacks after school. You can ask them to go search for images. If you do that, searching the web for images, which is great, just realize that will take a little bit longer. If you give them a preloaded set of images that they will choose from, usually 25 to 50 is a nice number to present to them, to let them pick a finite number, maybe 5 to 7, or even 1. They'll pick those, drop those onto a canvas of a collage, and tell you about what those are all about and how they relate to the task or decision-making process that you're trying to understand. Okay? So with that said, if they're searching for images of their own, it can take longer, so be respectful of that. If you provide the images, you can probably do some other things that particular day. For instance, if there's a flow charting exercise or a buyer decision map, that's a possibility as well. So that you can, actually set up an activity that gives them each step of a decision process, and also to understand what they did at each point in that decision process, all the way through the purchase and any, post-purchase, positivity or dissonance. Okay? So again, that's not an unrealistic thing to ask them to do a collage with preset images and perhaps some kind of buyer journey on day two. Okay? 2B, this might be overloading a little bit depending on where you go, but you could do a letter to a friend or a storytelling exercise where you ask for something brief or long. Again, if you want a real in-depth story, you may not do the buyer decision journey. You might do a little collage, maybe the storytelling exercise as well. These are great as either, biographical information, like the history of your, interaction with running and the shoes you bought over the years and how they've helped your performance. Or it could be something completely fictional, like, let's say, a, food disaster story if you're doing some food protection, like Glad Wrap or something like that. In that case, you might do a, tell us the worst possible thing that could happen, or the best meal that you've ever made. So you can create any kind of scenarios you want. Again, lay out what the task is, make sure they know exactly what it is they're going to, be doing or need to include in their story, and you should be able to produce really good stories, okay? So storytelling is a very, important and rich exercise that is worthy of, including in pretty much any study. And again, can be used as letter to a friend, imaginary stories, email to the boss, again, depending on the context of your category and what you're trying to understand. Okay? So let's go to day 3. So let's say on day 3, we might want to understand, brand personalities. Maybe an image set is produced and presented to the respondents with a bunch of logos, and you might ask, in this case, I've got some car brands up here, and there were some image sets here that they were asked to match the brand up with the image set that they thought it fit with. So kind of quick and easy, but the real richness not only is them applying the logos to the image sets that they think fit best, but also to dive in on the whys. Why did you, attach the Tesla logo to the image bank that you did? Okay, so it really gets into the open ends to really get the depth and understanding of why they feel the way they do about this exercise. Okay, and the brands, of course. And then perceptual mapping. Again, this is more of a little bit of a competitive day here. So I've got, a little bit of brand mapping, and then also we've got perceptual mapping, where it might be, you've got traditional X and Y axes you'd see in consulting. You've got continuum points on each end of those axes. So you kind of have 4 quadrants, so to speak. And you might ask them to map brands around those. It could be about taste or price or health or whatever it happens to be. And then again, the key thing is going to be after that, asking the whys. Why is it that you placed these images where you did? Okay? So moving right along, let's say on day 3 you could throw in some social stuff. And in this case, we've got a couple tools. One's like Pinterest, and one is a sentence completion tool we call the wishing wall. That is a social media Both of these are social media kind of driven activities that allow people to post thoughts and ideas and feelings, and then be able to see those of their other respondents in the study and like and comment accordingly. So there can be a little bit of back and forth, and a best practice approach to this is you usually want to launch your social community stuff a couple of days before the end of the study. Okay? The reason for that is obviously if you launch it on the last day, they're going to do it, kind of feel like they're done, and they're going to check out. If you launch it on day 2 or 3, what you end up having is you've got the ability for them to come in over the course of a few days, and of course there's reminders when people, you know, like or comment on each other's stuff, but it brings them back into, you know, to rejoin the conversation. So you want to consider when you launch your social stuff so that, again, it has a little bit of time to kind of curate, percolate, and you know, kind of grow with the, you know, with the interactions and the contributions from all your respondents. Okay? So run your social stuff for a few days. And then let's say on day 4, what you can do very easily here is, you know, this could be an idea day. And again, you could bag the idea day, take this out, and maybe reshuffle some of the things I showed you previously over the course of the 4 days. And that could be day 4, but in this case, a lot of times people will use day 4 as kind of a way to show some ideas. So there may be some, you know, some advertising they want to show. It could be just words on a page. As you see on the lower right of this, it's more of a mood board, a little bit of an idea description and some imagery that, you know, kind of brings it to life for respondents. And you can get reaction to that. You know, often, you know, a quick quant question, again, qual study, quant question just gives you context as to how they feel about it when you read their open-ended responses. So that's really a typical way that day 4 would work. And again, with day 4 here as you see it, remember on day 3 you launched a social, or you could have launched it on day 2. That'll be running in the background. So they will be, you know, re-engaging in that for maybe 10 minutes a day, checking new responses, seeing what people have said, looking at their own posts, seeing the conversation associated with that, and then hopefully re-engaging and adding to that. Okay? So that's a pretty good summary of a 4-day study. And I know this is kind of a brief webinar, but we're moving kind of quickly through it. My final thoughts are here, just to share this with you. A couple things that are really, really important. You know, one, keep it focused, you know, and creative. Don't just make it a survey, a qualitative survey. You certainly have the opportunity to do these deep dive things. And I show you things like collage, and I show you storytelling. And while you might think, oh, how do I understand how to do that? I'm not necessarily a psychologist. You don't really need to be a psychologist. This stuff presents itself. There are tools within our platform anyway to help you analyze that data, understand it quickly and easily. But again, it's your skill as a consultant that will allow you to, or again, if you're using a consultant and you're a client, that will allow you to, you know, put together the best kind of study and, again, analyze the data at the end. Okay? You want to use your imagination. We have seen so many cool things that have come through that we would have never thought about. And frankly, our platform has evolved because of that. So use your imagination. Think up ways to do things. Oftentimes, there are malleable tools within platforms to be able to get at the things you might be dreaming up. And try to understand what you've got in terms of tools. So lean on your provider, your platform provider, you know, to give you some ideas. You know, always bounce off your objectives with them. They should be able to help you create a skeleton of activities to do, and then you guys put the meat on the bones and bring home the nice, deep, rich insights. Okay? Another thing I cannot overemphasize, and I've said it a few times, you want this human connection with your respondents. And again, moderators, introduce yourself. Make that connection. Require the respondents to them do the same. Touch them, you know, not only with a little note saying, welcome to the study, really looking forward to what you're going to bring to the party. Excited to have you here, etc. Daily notes are great. And then a few probes over the course of the study. If you're a light prober, great. If you're a heavy prober, go for it. But that connection with people over the course of the study is super important. And then finally, have fun with it. You know, truly the possibilities are endless with online qual. There is so much stuff you can do. It can apply to just about every situation. It certainly isn't replacing face-to-face, but as an augment or perhaps a mixed method approach, it certainly is a different way of getting more connected to respondents. And the final thought I want to leave you here with is, if you think about a 4-day study, you've got, let's say, 40 people in that study. Those people are coming in and doing 30 minutes of work per day. So you've got 40 people who did 120 minutes of work. If you think about a focus group, for instance, oftentimes you're going to get 15 minutes of, maybe, deep discussion or insights from a participant. And in this case, you're going to get a couple of hours. So it's a different animal. And again, there's times and places for both methodologies, and oftentimes they mix. So with that, I am going to turn it back to Elizabeth to see if there's any questions. And, if there's any need to follow up with L&E or myself on this, you certainly can reach out to us and make that happen. Elizabeth?
Great, Ray. Thank you so much for sharing that overview on the AHA platform. And we do have a couple questions that came in from our audience, so I'm going to go ahead and read those off to you to answer. So
Great.
The first question that came in, is there any minimum or maximum number of respondents that can be in a study?
Yeah, great question. There really is not a set number. I mean, we've seen things as low as 8, and we see things as, as high as a couple thousand, just depending on what it is you're trying to do. But again, that is so much driven by budget. And again, a sweet spot tends to be in that 28 to 40 range. And you certainly can go higher. A lot of times we see 60 and 80, and that usually is driven by the fact there may be several segments that need to be represented. So, and the smaller studies, again, sometimes it's a real deep dive with, 8 to 10 people. Happens occasionally. That's not a real common approach, but, again, usually that sweet spot's around 40.
Great. Next question, how do you analyze the data of the study?
Okay, there's many ways to do that. You can do it on platform. So there are tools and observational tools from a moderating standpoint to be able to slice and dice your data, to cut it by segment, by activity, by individual respondent, by demographic data. So you can do it very easily on the platform. I recommend personally, if you've got, and it'd be a great investment if you don't have it already, but they have like a dual monitor situation. So you've got platform on one monitor, and you can do it on one, but it's really easy to do it on two. Platform on one, let's say your PowerPoint or whatever, presentation document you might be creating on your other screen. So that way you can kind of drag and drop and grab things and organize data really simply and easily and save it right into your PowerPoint and start to manipulate, your presentation or your storytelling report. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way, oftentimes I'm certain that other platforms do this as well, but on ours, we produce a formatted Excel export, and that will include images, video links. We can't embed video per se in an Excel export, but it comes out formatted, so it's easy to read. It's sorted by activity, can be sorted by segment, demographic, etc. And if you have any quant stuff, there'll be quant summaries. But again, an Excel, formatted Excel is another way. And so many people are very strong in Excel that their comfort level is more in managing the Excel export versus working on platform. But again, if you do a lot of studies and you're comfortable on a platform, it's a lot easier to do it on platform and direct to your PowerPoint. So those are the two methods. There also is the ability to export everything in a PDF if you kind of want some kind of a book, so to speak, to kind of refer back to. Oftentimes the PDF export is used to kind of give a summary of all the data to a client in electronic fashion. Okay.
Okay. We have time for just one more question. And that question is, are there any challenges or barriers in doing online research in international markets, specifically when dealing with foreign languages?
Yeah, there is. There are challenges. I mean, we've figured out most of them. The one that's always recurring is China. They like to always play around with the technology and what internet, accessibility people have to different things. But that's the only one that creates technical challenges. But we stay up to date on that, as I'm sure everyone in this business does. But the key things to understand in the international piece is recruiting. You've got to reach out and recruit in different regions, different languages. So it's good to have access to resources that can manage that for you. That's one piece. The other piece is translation. So you want to think about how you translate. So a couple translation tasks that are involved are, one, you have to have your activity guide translated. We use a translation company that actually has market research people that understand context so that they can look at things that we present to them in an activity guide and translate those in research terms to the foreign language. So you've got that piece. You've got activity guide translation. You have to manage help desk in the foreign language, so make sure whoever you're working with can handle foreign language stuff from a help desk standpoint, technical support. And then finally, the data transcripts. That is a big animal. You never know how much data you're going to get. So I always get people saying, well, what if I want to translate the final, the final transcripts of the entire study? Well, it's like, okay, difficult to really manage or understand what that numbers can be. And I can swag a number for people, but it usually has to be a kind of conservative range so that nobody gets burned on the back end. But it can be as high as $25,000 to have to go through an entire study and have it translated back. Oftentimes, even big multinational corporations will say, oh, we're cool with just using Google Translate. They use Chrome. They'll use Google Translate. It'll be very close on most languages. The Asian languages tend to be a little bit trickier. But again, you really do understand what they're saying, and it's really up to the skill of the moderator in that local market to know exactly what's being said and to put the report together. But if you're just observing as a client, or let's say a moderator on a project who may have a partner person working in another country on something, just being able to read that stuff in Google Translate, you'll definitely be able to follow the action. Again, Asian language is a little sketchier, but not bad. But all the European languages and South American languages, English, etc., obviously, are easy to Google Translate and do follow along very closely with what the actual meanings and feelings are of the respondents. Okay?
Great. Well, I want to thank Ray for joining us today. And if you have any questions about AHA that we didn't get to answer today, or if you'd like to see a free demo of this product, as mentioned before, our contact information is on this last slide. Thank you, Ray.
Elizabeth, thanks so much. Okay. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Exciting technologies to better understand your customer are here, and L&E Research has partnered with the most innovative companies to offer you turnkey solutions to better understanding your customers' needs. If you would like to learn more about our technology offerings or have a study and would like a second opinion on how to incorporate these technologies, call for a free consultation with one of our research design engineers or email us. Thank you for watching L&E Research's webinar series on the latest industry technologies. Have a great day.